Welcome to Andy and Ari on 3, presented by Wendy's. Happy Friday. It is a Dear Andy, Dear Ari mailbag day, and we got questions that run the gamut. We got a really good basketball question today, Ari.
I can't wait to dive into that one, man. You know, I'm your source for college basketball.
You don't need to know anything about college basketball for this one. You just need to know about people getting mad at coaches, which something we all understand in the football world.
I can handle that one.
Yeah, but we'll start out with a little bit of, it's not really realignment news because it probably will keep realignment from happening for a little bit longer. Hopefully, maybe we'll see. ESPN has picked up the ACC's media rights option through 2036. This is something I already remember when Florida State sued the ACC and Clemson sued the ACC. It was like, ooh, is the ACC even going to get its option picked up by ESPN? And ESPN's like, yes, we will pick up the option. According to the story by Andrea Adelson and David Hale of ESPN, one of the things they're going to do to try to get some more money toward the Florida States and the Clemsons and the North Carolinas of the world is these value add events where they're supposed to create better matchups, create better games that will maybe make ESPN give them a little more money. And as far as I can tell, this just means having Notre Dame play Clemson and Florida State pretty much every year.
Yeah, or you could create matchups and then just if you're really good, you just have a harder schedule to the playoff from now on too. That's another option.
Well, you're right. You could create matchups with the SEC. Like if you can schedule a bunch of good home and homes with SEC teams, that'll make ESPN happy because it has the rights to both leagues. So it's going to get both those games. So like the Florida-Miami matchup where it was in Gainesville last year, it's going to be in Miami this year. That's great. That works for them. The Notre Dame thing is the easiest thing because Notre Dame is contractually obligated to play 5 ACC teams a year.
Yeah.
So instead of just rotating it evenly, just set them up with the marquee brands.
That's what I mean. But that's what I mean. Like the marquee brands are going to potentially be in a position to make more money, but they're also going to have a harder schedule every year too as a result of it, which, you know, that's a small gripe, I guess. I'm sure Florida State would be happy to play a little bit of a harder schedule if it meant getting more money. But in terms of like the
I don't know about right now. I don't know how much Florida State was to play harder schedule right now in their current state.
Know that if more money is an option, there aren't a lot of downsides or things that people won't do to cash that check. It might be a better fan experience in terms of viewership. The team just might be in a harder position to make it, or a better one if they're good enough to win those games. So I think that like the interesting thing to me is the entire point of the sport's evolution, you know, at least from a fan benefit standpoint, should be the sales pitch of we're just going to have more good games everywhere in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And the consequences of losing those games aren't necessarily what they've been, but then it promotes the ability to strengthen your resume, but also have games that people want to watch. And I think that that's a good thing. So, you know, I think I would much rather watch Notre Dame play Clemson or Notre Dame play Florida State than I would, I don't know, I don't want to disparage anybody, but about a lower half, team.
You're saying you're not that fired up about Notre Dame Wake Forest. I got you.
Yeah, but also too at the same time, you could say you're not as fired up about Notre Dame Wake Forest as you are about Notre Dame Florida State, but at the same time too, Wake Forest is probably excited at the notion that this might keep their conference together, right? Because
exactly.
What do you want? Like, you want to play Notre Dame more, or do you want to be in a stable conference with big brands that people care about longer? Like that to me is like the number one thing. Wake Forest isn't necessarily as blessed as Northwestern. They're not as blessed as Vanderbilt from the, being on the right train at the right time, but they're also in a position where if you can kind of calm some of those waters that are causing the shakeups, because if and when the ACC falls apart down the line, like that's the next big domino that changes the entire complexion of the sport. So like, I don't know, like here's the thing that I have a hard time with, Andy, and you can help me with this, is that like when the Pac-12 died, I was really upset. Like I was like, that feels wrong. It feels weird. It feels bizarre. It feels just off to me. But it's like, now that the Pac-12 doesn't exist anymore, like how much energy should I even reserve in my own heart for like the salvation or the continued allegiance to what's already there. Like how much should the average college football fan that's not an ACC fan mourn the potential upcoming death of a conference when like the entire sport's different? It's like, why do we need to preserve the ACC right now? It's like the Pac-12's gone, the Big 12 isn't what it used to be. Like, should we just give in to the inevitable and just kind of hope that it happens so we can get to a resting area, or do we want to live in a tumultuous time where like we're just forever on the edge of our seat waiting to see what the next step is going to be in the reorganizing of the conferences and of course ultimately the sport? Like I don't know, like the idea of the ACC dying sucks to me in my head. But now that the Pac-12 is gone, it's like, well, it's like the house renovation. If you're going to get a new house, you might as well finish the job, right? Like, I don't know. Is that a weird way of looking at it?
Here's the thing. Everybody looks at that differently, because if you're a fan of a school that would be left on the side of the road when this happens.
Yeah, that's awful for them. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're North Carolina, if you're Clemson, if you're Florida State, if you're a fan of one of those schools, you're like, okay, yeah, like get to the thing. But there may be some sentimentality a little bit toward the conference, probably less with Florida State than with the ones that have been in it longer. But I think if you're the fans of the big brands, which here's the thing, that's most people, but it's not all people. So I think everybody's still trying to figure out how to thread that needle where you don't leave a bunch of schools on the side. I don't know if that happens or not.
What's the best reality for Wake Forest, though? Like, let's actually talk about this. If the best reality, of course, is the ACC staying together forever and then being in a conference that generates a lot of money with Florida State, Miami, and North Carolina.
Right.
But if we get to a point where that's no longer tenable, which I'm not sure, this might be a good step forward for a few more years. But like if we're thinking down the line to like 2040, which sounds forever from now, but it's actually not. It does feel like it's impossible for all the big brands to not be together eventually. Does that feel like a fair statement right now? It feels it's an inevitability. So
yeah,
if you're Wake Forest,
the ACC's contract is the last one, 2036.
The last one. So what do we? If we accept that as an inevitability, then what is the best case scenario for the Wake Forests of the world? Like, do you going to go team up with some of the other teams, and like is there like a resurrection of Wazoo and Oregon State and Wake Forest and all these? Can they like make their a new conference later down the line that's still included in the ultimate path to the playoff, but also is what it is? Like, or do you want it to be settled? Like, I feel like again, to go back to the house renovation thing, it's like, okay, well, we knocked down the Pac-12 and we're building this new structure, but it's like, oh, well, we're not going to do the other room that needs work.
Yeah.
And it's just like, might as well get to the final product and live in that reality.
I just don't know if it's ever going to. Yeah, I don't know if it's ever going to be settled because everybody's just sort of scrambling for everything. Like if you look at the conferences below the FBS, like the ones that are FCS football, or that some of the conferences with schools that don't even play football, that just start that basketball is their main sport, and they just like the moving around in there has been wild. It's been even crazier than what's gone on in the FBS. So I don't know that you're ever going to get a stopping point. Like realignment has been going on forever and probably will continue to go on. Now
the question is whether or not realignment can ever regress back to the norm. Like it could, nobody would ever willingly leave the SEC or the Big Ten. So I feel like once we get to the place where the Big Ten and the SEC are set, like I think that would be a long agreement that would last a very long time, because
I think at the top, at the top it would. At the bottom, it would keep the chairs would keep shuffling as everybody just tried to find more money.
Yeah. So, well, my ultimate fear has always been the same, and I'm assuming that you and I are on the same page on this, but it's like throughout my entire career, and I think if you host a national college football podcast, it's basically true. I saw someone did this to Josh Pate the other day of like, you only talk about the big brands. It's like my biggest fear in all of this isn't the preservation of what I feel is normal. It's the preservation of every single fan of every FBS school feeling like their team is a part of the system.
Yes.
And like, I don't know if it's an inevitability that it's a 20-team league in the Big Ten and a 20-team league in the SEC, and then it's a super league. Like, we've been talking about that for 2 years. I don't know if that's the inevitability here, but like, if we do arrive at a place where Wake Forest is left out and like Washington State and Oregon State becomes the norm for like 20 schools, that would really suck. And
It
like,
would.
we do care about you. Like, you might not think it because we talk about Ohio State and Georgia and Michigan a lot. And we do that, because those teams are interesting for longer during a year that the national championship is emphasized, but also too, they've got the largest fan bases. That doesn't mean that we won't take the time, and we haven't taken the time to talk about everybody and that we don't care about them. You know what I mean? Like, we spent a lot of time on ASU this year. Why? Because they gave us a reason to talk about them. They were interesting, and it's not a brand bias. It's an interesting bias. And I just don't want to get to a point where Wake Forest couldn't be interesting even if they were really good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's you always want to have the path to interesting, I think is the way I would put it.
Producer River with a good question. Hey, we got River chiming in with Dear Andy and Dear Ari questions. What does it mean for the middle of the road ACC schools, the Louisvilles, the Georgia Techs, the NC States? I think I throw Virginia Tech in here. Like, these are really good brands. These are good football brands. They're good. Well, I mean, Louisville, if they get basketball back on track, and they're trying, it's a good multi-sport brand. Like, there's got to be a place for those people. And I don't know if there's a super league, then those guys merge with the Big 12 to be kind of one under that.
As the Big Ten in the SEC get bigger, I'm assuming that the conferences that aren't the Big Ten and the SEC also will in turn get bigger as well. Mm-hmm. The thing that I wonder about, Andy, is that because the Pac-12 was the first to keel over, if those schools that were the leftovers, for lack of a better term, in the Pac-12 were in a better position to respond to that by, jumping to the ACC or the Big 12 as a result of being first. But like, if it happens now, it's like, if Florida State and Clemson and those guys in the ACC go to the SEC and the Big Ten, then where are the leftover spots left? Because like, that's only 5 or 4 schools that would be added to the ACC or the SEC and the Big Ten. I don't think the Big 12 can add 15 schools. You know what I mean? Like,
well, no, I think it would be more of a merger into their own kind of super conference.
Yeah. So I think that, like, it's also too that maybe the solution here is a conference that doesn't have a name yet, or that doesn't exist yet, right? And that's always on the table. And again, as much as I've pushed back at the notion of the expanded playoff being the right thing for the sport, I think that the right thing for the sport is inclusion to the system. And if the consequence of that is a blowout in the first round, then I think that's a small price to pay for Wake Forest to have a path to being good.
I mean, how much did you enjoy watching the end of the Big 12 regular season schedule, the last month of Big 12 play? How much did you enjoy? Like,
buddy, they were on the edge of Miami, Texas. They were almost to the semis, baby.
Yeah,
like they were there,
100%.
So like,
100%.
Here's the thing that I cannot stand, and like as we are removing ourselves away from the finality of last year, I've had some time to reflect on it. And like, as you know, I was very annoyed when we were together the first weekend of the playoff in Ohio about the discourse of the blowouts, right? A, because blowouts happen all the time, and B, there's nothing that we could ever do to prevent them. But like, I do think that if we are going to exist in a system where there are 12 teams in there, that is enough of a it's enough of a window, or there's enough space to include everybody. And it's like Boise State losing to Penn State pretty handily. Like, if that's the consequence for Boise State getting to play a game, then like, I think that's complaining that it was a blowout is fucking stupid. Like, it's like, if you either want them in or you don't. And if we want them in, which we've made the decision collectively as a nation that we want them in, then like, we have to preserve the ability for those teams that aren't in the big conferences to at least have a chance. And maybe 99% of the time, they don't have a chance from a physical standpoint in terms of the rosters they can put together. But if 99 times they get blown out, but win 1 out of the 100, I think that is enough. We have to preserve that. Like, we cannot tell.
I think it'd be a lot of fun to see it, because we almost saw it with ASU in Texas.
And that's just the thing that I got so upset about the Feinbaum tweet. Like, we don't have to like reopen that wound, but like, if you just want to put the best or the biggest, most talented teams in the 12-team field, then you're telling all these schools like SMU and Wake Forest and all the other ones that fall under that same umbrella that even if you are good, it doesn't matter. We cannot get to a place, whether I'm a big brand biased guy or not, where we tell a large portion of the country that their games do not matter. And if we do that, then we need to have two separate leagues where they're not playing for the same championship, or we need to figure it out because that's stupid.
It's bad for business. It's bad for business. Like leaving a couple of those big brands out so that the other group, which is still a large number of people, because we're talking about the fans, we're talking about the potential customers.
Just because the individual fan bases aren't as big as Alabama doesn't mean that they're not collectively massive.
Right. Like, if you kick them all out in the aggregate, you've cost yourself a lot of customers. So I'm with you. I'm thinking more from a dollars and cents standpoint here. Like if you leave Alabama or South Carolina or Ole Miss out so that you can keep, because you're not keeping the two teams that make the playoff, those fan bases. You're keeping the fan bases for everyone in their leagues.
That's right. If like SMU wouldn't have gotten in favor of Alabama at the end of the year, then what are you telling Wake Forest? What are you telling Virginia Tech? What are you telling all Louisville? What are you telling? It's not just screwing SMU fans. It's screwing the entire country that has a program that's similar to that. So when I was like stumping for SMU at the end of the year, I wasn't stumping for SMU. I was stumping for college football. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that like people didn't understand that in the moment. And like, that's the thing. If they are in the system, then we treat them as part of the system. If you do not want them in the system, then they should be playing for a different trophy at a lower level. But you can't have both. You can't say, hey, everyone's welcome, and then slam the door in their face when they do what they needed to do. Especially in the face of Alabama and Miami and the other teams not doing what they need to do. It's not picking two equal parties. It's picking the worst party in terms of an accomplishment standpoint to tell the better party or the more accomplished party that their fan base does not matter. And if you do that, that's why the headline was so dramatic, Andy. That's why the headline is the biggest threat to college football imaginable, because I roll my eyes of NIL is going to ruin college football and the expanded playoffs. Like nothing's going to ruin college football other than telling a large segment of the fans, the Syracuse fans, that their fucking season doesn't matter. Like, and I'm sorry, but like, I don't mean to get wound up about it and use the F word, but like, that's the truth. SMU getting in was good for Syracuse. SMU getting in was good for Wake Forest. And if you want to talk about this podcast and all we care about is the Bama and, the Ohio States of the world, then play this clip on repeat. Okay. Because this is how I really feel. And if you can't tell, like I'm pretty wound up about it. I've had a long 24 hours. I'm very passionate about this specific instance. And that is why my behavior at the end of the year, both online and in column form and on this podcast, illustrated it. Because like that to me is the number one issue. It's not collective bargaining. It's not transferring. It's not NIL. It's not bagmen. It's not even cheating. It's telling the teams that are in the sport that even though they're in it, it does not matter. Sorry.
That's fine. I'm glad you got that off your chest. All right. I got to get this off my chest now, though. Huel. Busy mornings, late nights, working through lunch. Life does not always leave room for a complete and balanced meal. And that is where Huel comes in. This is the Huel Black Edition right here. We've got 35 grams of protein. We've got 27 vitamins and minerals. We got 7 grams of fiber. We have a complete meal in a bottle. And when you don't have time to cook, when you don't have time to shop, being able to grab that bottle and have a meal that delivers all the nutrients you need and all the energy you need to get you through the next meal is a godsend. So go to Huel.com, Huel.com. Use the code Staples15. You get 15% off your first purchase. You also get a free gift. No more skip meals. No more unfulfilling snacks. Huel.com. Use the code Staples15. I'm telling you, it's awesome. My kids will do it for breakfast. My wife grabs them for lunch at work. I'll hit a Huel for breakfast every once in a while just to get me through to lunch. And it always does. I'm never worried about, am I going to be hungry? No, I'm not. It's not like one of those little cardboard box protein shakes. This is a full meal right here. Huel.com. Use code Staples15, 50% off your first purchase and a free gift. Ari.
I didn't eat dinner last night, and I was starving when I woke up, and I slammed one of those, and I feel great.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And you'll be good till lunch. And that's the best part. Now, it is a mailbag day. We have some great questions. First question comes from @AE5. I love the way this was asked because I wanted to talk about this topic anyway, but I actually would rather talk about it in this format. What would happen if Michigan just said no to the NCAA if they're put on probation? Kind of like when Larry David showed up for work the day after quitting. And I was like, when I first read this, okay, that's the first thing I thought. So here's the deal. Larry David, of course, is the co-creator of Seinfeld. He wrote the episode of that. Yeah, he wrote and wrote the episode where George quits and then comes back like nothing happened. Because that actually happened to Larry David in the 80s when he was a writer for Saturday Night Live. He got really mad on a Friday, said, I quit, I'm never coming back, stormed out, realized over the weekend he messed up, and just showed back up to work on Monday.
I was joking. I don't know, like, to me, you know what sports writers do? Stuart Mandel does this all the time. Yeah, I'm coming for you, Stu. They like tweet out and joke about things like in pop culture from like 30 years ago that no one gets. And like, I'm starting to wonder.
Rick Riley was huge on that.
Like the Bruce Springsteen of sports writers of like, yeah, this reminds me of Bruce. It's like, if we have 3,835 people watching this live right now, what do you think the average or median age is of those people?
Oh, it's low because people who watch things on YouTube, who watch shows on social media, tend to be under 35.
If you're in the chat right now and you like to type, just type in your age. I'm very curious. I'd like to know how old you guys are. 40s? Because it's like, I'm 36. Oh, shit, I'm 37 now.
Old man.
I watch Seinfeld when, like, I go to bed at night. Like, when Britt's not here or she's out of town or something, like, I fall asleep to Seinfeld. I think it's one of the greatest sitcoms ever made. Are Seinfeld jokes landing to people? Or are we at that, like, age cusp of, like, okay, maybe we don't make Seinfeld jokes because we don't want to, like, leave a certain segment of the audience. There's a 15-year-old in here, by the way.
Yeah, and Jack Terry, who's our coworker, says he's 7. Jack, we know you're actually like 24, but
he's actually like maybe at heart 7. I don't know. I gotta get to know him better. He's got good vibes.
We actually are gonna have Jack on the show at some point because Jack is the person behind the greatest on-3 graphics, and we're gonna have to explain how this process works. I want to go deep inside his mind. But this is interesting. But I'm watching this. We got people in their 20s, people in their 30s, people in their 40s. So, hey, advertisers, check it out. Broad-reaching podcast. Broad-reaching.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, I don't know if we are at the... Because when was Seinfeld airing new? In the 90s, right?
Seinfeld aired new in the 90s. So it went off the air in 1998.
I mean, that was literally almost what? A Bad at Math podcast 30 years ago?
Yes. Yes, more than 25 years ago. So
I mean, that's so like, and I don't even know if that humor carries over to like the new generation. So I just like when Stuart Mandel tweeted about Alice in Chains, like I'm 37, I had no idea what the hell he was talking about. Like, you know, and I don't ever want to do a show.
You were like, too young for Alice in Chains. It kind of split the middle with you because you were like 6 when they were most popular.
Like you were arguing with people on Twitter about what the best Alice in Chains song was. It's like I couldn't name an Alice in Chains song if you put
it's Wood. It's Wood, and the people got very mad. There were some big Man in the Box fans, some big Angry Chair fans, some big Them Bones fans. But no, yes, but the Seinfeld jokes I feel like are fairly universal. Like the idea of quitting and coming back the next day like nothing happened.
Yeah,
that's funny now as long as you present it in a funny way. Like it doesn't have to be George. There was a Twitter feed that had like, what if Seinfeld had cell phones? Because there are certain episodes of Seinfeld, like the Chinese restaurant and the party garage
modern day Seinfeld is one of the best. There's some really funny ones.
Like cell phones destroy the parking garage episode. Cell phones destroy, or smartphones destroy that. Smartphones destroy the Chinese restaurant episode. But it's okay. It's okay. The world does keep turning. But the
That's the
joke's
number
still
one
in.
critique of The Wire, right? Like people don't like watching The Wire now because it was outdated.
Because of the pagers. Yeah, because the
Like,
first
I
season's
actually
all about
think
they're using pagers. So
I actually think that the coolest thing about Sopranos is that there are no cell phones. Or they were like mobile phones. Like they were, but like it was like I liked the era of that.
well, smartphones are kind of the ultimate problem solver. So they create a bunch of plot holes, or they would solve all your plot holes, unfortunately. And that's you need to be able to have some of those. So that is one of the issues. But all right, let's talk about this Michigan thing. Let's say Michigan is punished in a severe way, and we don't know that they will be. But we do know that Michigan is digging in for a fight
Andy,
against the NCAA.
I'm like terrible at podcasting. I gotta just read you this modern Seinfeld thing because of what you were just saying. I have to add this. I'm so sorry. If you want me to quit, I will. I'm a terrible host. This is modern Seinfeld plots. George's girlfriend wants a no phones at dinner rule. George, we had a good thing going, Jerry. Now what are you supposed to do? Talk? This can only end badly.
Nah, exactly. Now that would work.
All of these things, yeah.
But okay, I will tell you, Bizarro, perhaps my favorite episode of Seinfeld. Like that idea of there's a Bizarro world version of your friend group, which, by the way, I think Bizarro was also Manhands. That same episode, that the Manhands was the B plot of Bizarro. Like, still universal, still funny. Doesn't matter that smartphones exist. It all still works. So
after her buddy texts Elaine that he could come over to watch Netflix, Elaine is actually mad when he gets there and wants to watch Netflix. Like, can you like just picture these episodes?
This would be amazing. Is Julia Louis-Dreyfus too busy for this right now? Because I want to see that episode right now.
They could run it back if they really wanted to, in a world where every single thing that they make in the world is a remake now. Like every movie that comes out's a remake, every show is a remake. There's no imagination, there's no newness. Like, are you telling me that if Larry David wanted to punt on Curb and they wanted to make a modern Seinfeld of them at this age, that they couldn't make an amazing show? I guarantee you they could. Okay,
it'd be amazing. They're tired of it and too rich. But let us talk about Michigan. So Michigan is digging in for a fight against the NCAA. The NCAA is going to try to punish Michigan, I think, as harshly as it can. This would be the Committee on Infractions, by the way, not the NCAA enforcement staff, because that's how that works. The Committee on Infractions, which is made up of people from schools, they do the punishing. I do think they will try to get the most severe punishment they can. I'm not entirely sure what that is at this moment, because the principals involved in this thing, you've got Connor Stallions, he's gone. Jim Harbaugh, because you can attach anything that was done by an underling to the head coach. They added that because they were really bad at getting head coaches on stuff because of plausible deniability. But Jim Harbaugh's gone. He's in the NFL. So I'm not exactly sure what they can do. They're going to try to punish Sharon Moore. You got deleted text messages from Sharon Moore, but they weren't really deleted because they were still on his phone. He gave his phone to them knowing that they'd find them. So it wasn't I don't even know if that's actually not cooperating. So I'm not entirely sure what they could do.
Okay. Do you want to get into the conversation that we had on the phone the other night? Let's get into that.
Let's do it.
Okay. So you and I were on separate ends of a conversation, although I think we agree on the core issue here, which is this is like, what are we doing? Right. Like, I don't know. The point of this is that when you do something wrong or you're accused of doing something wrong, people want due process and results. So that's fair. But like, there are only two ways I think that Michigan can be hurt at this point, because they have the hardware. As you said, the games are on YouTube. The games happen. We watched them. They won. And they won a lot of those games, or most of them, all the big games after they were caught. And
no doubt. We're talking about the national title season. Yeah.
2 years ago. One would be to suspend Sharon Moore for a long period of time so that it cost Michigan future wins. That's the first way you could hurt Michigan.
Right, which I think is probably something they're trying to do.
Right. And like also too, if he turned his phone over and there's nothing on it, I don't even know what he's being punished for.
Well, exactly. That's the thing. Like
that's the
they're,
thing.
they're saying he deleted text messages, and that's bad. Except that when they said, "Can you?" and this is his personal phone, they said, "When you turn this over, will you turn this over?" And he willingly turned it over, knowing they were going to find the text messages he deleted, which means he doesn't think there's anything on there
on my phone that I would like to recover for personal reasons one day. I don't know, like, and I know what you're thinking.
Let's call the NCAA. Maybe they can find him.
But some stuff from back in my early 20s. But the second thing is where we disagree.
Yes.
Okay. And like fines, whatever. Michigan can just pay the fine. No one gives a shit, right?
Right.
So the one way you could hurt them going forward is by penalizing the coach. And I think by penalizing the coach, that also makes the general public feel like he did something wrong, even though it doesn't seem like he did.
Now, I will point out that the head coach at the time did miss 3 games of that season,
which is why
the 2 most important regular season games because of this thing. Now, Harbaugh missed games earlier in the season because of the Burgergate thing, but he actually missed 3 because of this thing, which I would argue is the most significant coaching suspension that has ever happened in this era of college football.
I just don't. So that's the thing. Like, before I go to the second thing, which is the number one topic here, I don't know if I were Michigan, I would not lay down if Sherrone Moore did nothing wrong. Okay. And I don't know what he did or what he didn't. I guess the point is if they cannot prove that he is culpable in some way, the suspension has already been served.
Jim Harbaugh,
from the head coach, who was in,
yeah.
Like, what is he out for? Like that's the thing. I would fight, be like, what am I personally being penalized for?
Right.
But here's the way that I think that you hurt them the most. If they did something and it's proven that they, quote unquote, for lack of a better word, cheated. Vacating the national title. Now, you think that is stupid. So why don't you go ahead and tell
I think it's utterly pointless. I mean, they can do it if they want, but no one will actually care. Ohio State fans will be like, asterisk. Michigan fans will be like, bet, whatever. Come get my national title shit at my house. Like, you're not going to do it. It doesn't change anything. Like, ask the Louisville people who had to take down their banner over the stripper thing. Like, nobody freaking cared. They won the national title. Like,
so this is where we fundamentally disagree, because to me, yes, you can't take away that the games mattered. And you cannot take away that JJ McCarthy picture, and you can't even take away the fact that they won the games. Like, there's no going back in time. The number one thing that college football fans, I think, care about over the long term is how your greatness is remembered. And I think at the moment that Michigan's greatness 2 years ago is remembered by the general population of college football as a really good run.
I think at the moment, Ohio State fans, this team is remembered by Ohio State fans as cheaters and everybody else as champions, and no one's opinions will change at all, no matter what.
You just made my point.
Did Ohio State fans think they cheated? Ohio State fans will think they cheated no matter what.
No matter what. I'm with you. We're agreeing on this.
And no one else will change their mind, and no one else will care.
What you just said there, I disagree with, because you said that the rest of the sport views them outside of Ohio State fans as champions and a great team. And I think if you take away the title in the record book, whether it happened or not, you put yourself in a position where the rest of the country will view you more similarly.
Okay, Michigan fans in the chat, do you give a crap if an Oklahoma State fan thinks you cheated for the national title? Does that matter to you even one little bit? Let me know. Will that change your... If the NCAA says you didn't win that national title, what do you think? Like,
what do you think that a Michigan fan is going to say publicly? The entire point of being a fan is to talk shit online. You think they're going to go, oh, I care so deeply if they do it? They don't care right now, but I do think that, like, the purity of a championship, very much the same as an Ohio State fan will probably...
It's not a pure championship. It was argued the entire time it was happening. Everyone is aware it's disputed.
Same exact thing as the Ohio State championship this year. Ohio State won the national championship. Ohio State fans right now will probably tell you publicly that they don't give a shit that they lost to Michigan, but in 10 years, when they look back at it, that won't give a shit. Part of it. So
the Michigan, no. In 10 years, Michigan fans going to come up and say, hey, remember when we beat you 13-10? And the Ohio State fans don't care, won the national title. How were your 5 losses that year?
That the stance that you have on this is, when we look back at this in the annals of history, that if there is an asterisk or it is removed from the record books, that people don't care about that at all.
Because people don't care. Like, the world has demonstrated over and over and over again that nobody gives a crap.
I'm going to write about this, and I might be wrong. I know for sure, for me personally, that I would care about the way I was remembered.
Producer River with a good point. Did you think Reggie Bush was not a Heisman Trophy winner for the period that he did not have a Heisman Trophy?
Very different scenario, because Reggie
No, it
Bush,
is not. Because a Michigan fan doesn't think they did anything wrong.
What I'm going to say. You can't say no before I tell you what I'm saying.
Okay, go ahead.
Reggie Bush didn't do anything that was perceived to allow him a competitive advantage. Like, he cheated in the sense that he took money, but like, nobody thinks that taking money.
And no Michigan fan thinks that they got a competitive advantage.
No,
because
Michigan
that's how they
thinks that, because
justify it in their minds.
They have to justify it that way in their minds. But I think if Sharon Moore takes a suspension, or if you take away their national championship in the record books, the general fan who isn't on YouTube with us every day will look at that and say, well, they got their like, it's the same thing that with the Fab Five, right? Like, no one cares now, right? You're saying that
well, the Fab Five also didn't win anything. The Fab Five called a timeout when they didn't have one. That's the most memorable thing they did.
Yeah. I mean, college basketball is just different. I don't think that if I accomplish something, that like I would want my accomplishment to be met with a barrage of you cheated. And I think if you vacate the championship, a person that doesn't pay attention to it,
there's already a barrage of you cheated. It doesn't change anything.
It's a barrage from Ohio State. I don't think they'd want a barrage from Utah fans.
Utah fans wouldn't care. They wouldn't say anything because they don't care.
Yeah. And like, I wish I could do an anonymous poll that would be, because like if I do it on Twitter, then it'll just be a bunch of Ohio State fans trolling it. Like, I really do want to know, like, if we're being honest with ourselves, if you are an Ohio State fan, how much does the Michigan game actually in your core bother you? Not outwardly what you say, how you feel when you are alone in your thoughts, and how much, if you're a Michigan fan, would the satisfaction of the championship be altered by it being vacated? And right now, everybody in the job, I don't care. I think people care more than they're willing on to let on.
Or we can take them at face value that they don't care, because they don't freaking care. They don't care. They do not care. The world does not care. The random Utah fan is not even going to give a second thought to Michigan's 2023 national title in 20 years. They don't care. Do
you think that Houston Astros fans don't care? And I'm not saying it's the same.
I don't think they care at all.
Oh, they fucking care, buddy. You don't see any championship t-shirts from that year. And I think that
you live in Dallas. They have a team that recently won a World Series.
I know a lot of people who are Houston fans, and they're like, yeah, that year basically didn't happen to us. And it's like, but like their cheating like was actually like the reason they won. And like, that's the other thing about this. It's like, I don't know. And the reason why I'm bored by the discourse of this, because the one thing that I actually care about here, Andy, and I think that you are with me on this, is how much did the actual things that they were doing change the results of their games? How much of what they were doing actually helped them win?
Right.
And we cannot prove that. So if we can't
now the teams they beat before they got caught, they would have beaten the crap out of no matter what. That's the other part of the problem.
They were really good. Like, in my gut.
And then the teams they beat after they got caught were the ones that might have beaten them, and they still beat them. And oh, by the way, they didn't have their coach for the two most important games, including Ohio State, which still lost to not Jim Harbaugh, which should feel extra bad. And I think it does.
In my gut, I actually don't think that them doing what they did was the reason they won games. But in my chest, when I think, or my head, when I think about it, it's like, well, then why were you doing it? You know what I mean? Like, then what's the point? If it wasn't helping you, then why would you do it? So, like,
I am not one of those that didn't give them an advantage, people. It gave them an advantage.
Yeah.
It did.
So, the question, I guess, here, let's just actually say it. If Connor Stallions was at the University of Hawaii that year, would Michigan have won the national title?
Yes.
In your mind?
Yes.
Yes. And I think they would have too. Okay. I think by vacating it, you create a doubt to the entire country. And you can say people don't give a shit, and maybe they don't.
Because they don't.
People don't. That's the only thing that I think that you could do from a punitive standpoint, even if you don't think that it lands, to actually make anyone care.
No, and that's what I would just, if I'm a Michigan person, I would just laugh at them if they did that. Now,
I would not
be really mad
if
they suspended Sharon Moore for a long time. I'd be very mad about that, because that is actually.
If I was a Michigan fan wearing a 2023 national championship shirt in public, you know, like when you go to the airport after a sporting event, and everybody at the airport is wearing their team's gear, like even when they lose. I would not want the greatest accomplishment of my lifetime as a sports fan to be met with, in thoughts, as people walk by me, they cheated. That would matter to me. If it doesn't matter to you,
you're way more sensitive than I am. You just are. Like, I would give zero shits.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like the entire point of competition is to be the best. And like, if people think you weren't after you proved that you were, that
except
would suck.
They think they were, and they don't think they got any sort of competitive advantage, because that's how they justified in their minds.
Why do you? Yeah, right. So like, I'm not even saying like it, you know.
So what you're saying, you're acting like you're feeling guilty about it. There's no Michigan fan feeling guilty about it. So if somebody looks at their shirt and is like, "Well, you cheated that year," they don't care, because they don't think they did.
Yeah. It'd be like if I wrote a best-selling book and I got a fuck ton of money for it, and then like it came out that like I stole the entire idea for it, and it was a New York Times bestseller. I would have all the money, but like my personal.
No. You would actually have to give the money to the person whose idea you stole it from.
No,
like,
but what if it was just an allegation, and we didn't actually know if I did it or not? It was a he said, she said.
It would go to court, and it would be determined whether you did or didn't. So the court might make you pay that money.
You're thinking too deeply on this. I'm
thinking too logically. I know. It's terrible.
The greatest accomplishment of my life was called into question as a fraud. That would bother me. Okay, so if it doesn't bother you, that would suck. I mean,
it doesn't bother. What I'm telling you is, it doesn't bother them. So if it doesn't bother them now, it won't bother them after getting vacated either. If it bothered them now, you would already know that. But it doesn't bother them.
I don't buy that, and I don't buy that Ohio State losing to Michigan this year doesn't bother them. It might not outweigh the accomplishment, but it does bother them. I think it's the same thing.
I think they're having fun celebrating their national titles. Both of them. The one last year and the one this year.
But I want to write about this. So let me ask you this, though. You at least agree with the premise that that's the only way you can actually effectively punish them at this point, right? Their coach is gone.
That's not an effective punishment. So
your thought is you can't punish them. What are we even doing?
Pretty much. But that's the problem with a lot of NCAA justice, is the people who actually did the stuff, they can't reach. Like in real life, the person who actually did the stuff, unless they flee the country, faces justice for it and can go to jail or whatever, can be punished in some way, financially or by going to jail. In this case, if you leave NCAA land voluntarily, there's nothing they can do to you. So the fact that they can never actually get the people who did the thing is the problem, and has always been the problem. So it's going to be unsatisfying no matter what.
You know, when Ohio State won the national title in 2014, they put up a sign That was my 4th year on the beat at the time. They put up a sign on Lane Avenue with the trophy that said undisputed.
Yeah.
That probably felt pretty fucking awesome.
Sure.
They're not going to put that up this year. They're not going to put it up in Ann Arbor because
why? There's no dispute that they won the national title.
Okay.
Are you disputing their Ohio State's national title?
No, I'm not.
Okay,
but there are
it's
people
undisputed.
I'm talking about Michigan. Like I think that it's a pretty disputed title. That would suck.
Well, sure. Then just put a picture of the trophy and I'll put a word next to it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I'm saying like the inability to celebrate.
Or just put a picture of the trophy and put the word bet.
Yeah.
You're making this out. You want to ascribe something that some Ohio State fan thinks to a Michigan fan.
The entire
point
things. Of being a sports fan is to be able to talk shit to your other person. Ohio State fans
they can. Both parties can about their national titles.
Yeah. And then
they can.
No. You want to know last year? Okay. We're talking in circles. You get where I stand, and I get where you.
I get it. You think it matters. I know it doesn't, and that's
I think that as we're in a world, as we are spending all this time talking about it, and Brett Bielema, and there's an investigation happening. We don't know what's going to happen. That the only thing that they could do to Michigan at this point is either suspend Sherrod Moore,
right,
moving forward. Or vacate the title,
which I think will get them. I think is going to get them dragged into real court if they try to do that. And that is the other issue.
That's the thing too. It's like I don't know where this is headed, but if I were Sherrod Moore,
I actually think Michigan might drag them into real court over a vacated title. So while I'm saying the Michigan fans won't care, the Michigan administration might care enough.
Why would they care, Andy? Why would they sue them over that? No one gives a shit.
Why
would they care? Why?
If you're the Michigan administration, you care.
Why?
Because you don't want to be portrayed as a cheater. No, I said Michigan fans don't give a shit.
You don't want to be portrayed as a cheater. So you do agree that
I didn't say I didn't.
By vacating it, that you are portrayed as a cheater.
You also, if you're Michigan, why wouldn't you use every avenue to not have an adverse effect at all? You could bring down the whole system if you wanted to. That would probably be negative to the NCAA. I don't think Michigan would care about that at that point. So,
I'm not even saying that it is fraudulent. I'm saying if it smells fraudulent, that sucks.
Okay. Well, I'm telling you that the average fan won't care. Yes, the Michigan administration will care, and they probably will fight back. And I don't know if the NCAA wants that fight either. That's the other problem here.
Well, this is the thing too. It's like the NCAA is just is Millhouse. And no matter what they do, they're just going to get their ass kicked.
Not the Dave Millhouse wears the wading boots and he's like everything's coming up Millhouse.
I do think that Michigan is probably the stronger front in a legal battle here. So
right, and that's the thing. Like the North Carolina case with the fake classes and all that. North Carolina was prepared to drag the NCAA into court if there was a serious punishment levied for that. Now, the enforcement staff messed that up by saying that was an extra benefit when everyone knew it was available to every student. And so the Committee on Infractions very wisely goes, we can't punish them for that because it's not actually an extra benefit.
You know what's interesting, and I don't know if you've been paying attention to the chat, but we are like 50-50 on this debate, by the way. Like there are people.
I know. It's a great podcast topic.
But I also think too that like you're probably right in some instances, and I'm probably right in some. Don't you think? Like you don't think that?
No, I 100%. There's a reason I chose this question.
Okay, but you're like saying nobody will care is like patently false.
Ari,
okay.
Do you understand how the internet and shows work?
No, explain it to me.
You stake out a side.
I know, but your side is wrong. You can't say nobody will.
And your side is, and I think your side is wrong, and that's why it's the perfect topic.
No, but I also think that some people are going to care. I'm not saying everybody. Like you're making a statement that nobody.
No. I think Ohio State fans care deeply.
No, I think you're saying no.
I just don't think any Michigan fan cares what they think.
That is wrong.
Okay.
Love you though, but
you think so?
You can't make a blanket statement about anything. Sure
you can.
In life.
Have you never watched a TV show? Have you never watched Stephen A. Smith even once?
Yeah.
Blanket statements equal ratings, buddy.
I know. I've made a mistake in my career a lot of like talking for people, and like if people get mad, it's like, yeah, and it's like actually something I do in my personal life too. Of like, everybody thinks this, and it's like, no, they don't.
No, everybody doesn't think anything.
I just got an Ari is right from a Michigan avatar there, pal.
Woo,
look at that very often.
Look at that. All right.
Ari Wasserman's next article. Andy Staples' position in the Michigan investigation is the biggest threat imaginable to college football.
Do it. Yes.
It's not actually.
I would love to be the biggest threat to something.
The actual truth to this whole topic is that, like, no matter what they do, whether people care or not, it changes nothing. And I think that's the overarching sentiment of like, okay, you can take the title away or you can try to suspend Sherrone Moore moving forward. The two real realities of this is that they won the national title 2 years together, whether you like it or not. How you receive it afterwards is your prerogative. And two, there's nothing that can be done. The one thing I will say, and I want to make this point before we move on, is if I were Sherrone Moore and I did cooperate and handed my phone over and they found nothing, I would refuse any settlement that willingly accepts a suspension, because I also think that accepting a suspension will, whether it's true or not, create an environment where you're culpable or at least responsible for something that happened. I think I would rather go to whatever court system that they would go to, I wouldn't take
and I think that is a punishment that actually does mean something.
That's supposed to be dead. That era is supposed to be dead.
Right.
If your current coach gets suspended for what happened then you are labeled as cheaters moving forward. Now, it might result in a suspension if they go and lose, but based on my understanding of what's going on behind the scenes, Michigan strikes me as in a position where he would probably win.
I think they feel very confident in their
I wouldn't
position
accept
there,
even a suspension for a half if I were him. I wouldn't give them an inch of public
acknowledgement,
culpability.
Yeah. No, I think you're probably right about that. Now, would they make a deal just to make it go away at some point? If it felt like it wasn't going to affect anything, but you're right. They feel like they're in a pretty good position there. So we'll find out. All right, we got to talk about State and Liberty. I'm wearing the State and Liberty black waffle knit hoodie. I was in Mobile the other night. I was hanging out with some football coaches. They're like, man, you've been in the weight room. I'm like, no. That's just State and Liberty just hugging all the right places, because they build their clothing for people who, might go to the weight room every once in a while, but the way they hug you makes it look like you're going to the weight room all the time, because they don't have the things that have like a giant gut on it, because you don't have a giant gut. You've been working out. Comfortable, but does not sacrifice fit or quality, holds up in the wash. This sucker goes through the washing machine, goes through the dryer. It is fantastic. Use the code STAPLES for 10% off for new customers. And remember, State and Liberty, you've got hoodies like this, but you can also go all the way up to suits. I've got a couple State and Liberty suits. They're awesome. I wore one in the national championship game. So whether you're dressing down or dressing up as much as possible, because they actually have tuxedos as well, stateandliberty.com. Use the code STAPLES, 10% off for new customers. And Ari, we have a little news. Little news from our guy, Pete Nakos. Oklahoma targeting Arkansas State defensive coordinator Nate Dreiling for a role on Brent Venables' staff. Could that be defensive coordinator? Dreiling was Utah State's interim coach for the 2024 season. So he was the interim head coach. So young guy, up and coming. Perhaps that is your new Oklahoma defensive coordinator.
Important thing to monitor to see who goes to. I just turned the light from cold to warm, and I look tan and pretty now.
Look at that.
I was in the wrong light the entire time. We got to redo that whole last segment because it's going to go viral,
right.
And I don't want to look.
Everybody want to talk about the Michigan thing again? Let's go.
Okay. All right. So here's the thing about Michigan. No, that's an important piece.
Can you imagine?
We just ran it back for 40 minutes.
Because I think we hit the sweet spot there where we, just had just enough, but not too much, where people were about to get sick of it and turn it off. But all right, I want to get to this one from Hudson because I find this utterly fascinating. Plus, we've got some Rick Pitino video that goes with it. From Hudson. Hey, Andy, I know this isn't college football specific, so I totally understand if y'all don't want to weigh in, but I also know y'all dip your toes into other sports when the offseason rolls around. So I wanted to get your thoughts on John Calipari returning to Lexington this weekend. The debate among fans in Kentucky this week has been whether Cal should be booed or cheered on Saturday night. All right, let's start with what Rick Pitino said, because Rick Pitino has experienced this in real life as a former Kentucky coach who came as the visiting coach.
Before you play the clip, though, this is a college basketball question, but I think that this pertains to college football and how fans should treat coaches who return. But
universal.
Second, like that debate and what Rick Pitino did, I think are two different things, because like I don't understand Rick Pitino's like involvement in this at all. Like, explain.
Let's play Rick Pitino's video first, and then we'll talk about it.
Hello, Big Blue Nation. I didn't steer you wrong with Mark Pope when I sent out that last video, and I certainly won't steer you wrong with this video. Toughest day of my coaching career at Louisville was when I had to walk into Rupp Arena. Tried not to show it, but when I went home, the reception, it tore me up apart because I love that place so much. And it's interesting because I was speaking to Ed Cooley just recently about Providence, and he said he almost was brought to tears because of the bad feelings he got going back there. But this is different. And as you all know, I'm not best friends with John Calipari. I respect him, certainly. But it was a mutual thing. The fans wanted a change. John read the tea leaves. He needed a change. And he really didn't want to leave. But what did he do for you? He brought the best talent in the history of the game of any university in America to Lexington. He also won a national championship. He also was, his style of play was extremely entertaining. So he's coming back on Saturday. And I want all of you to show the great class that you have. 23,000 plus people giving him a huge standing ovation. Show him what respect and admiration's all about. I know you have the class. I've always believed in you. Do it once again.
All right. So how do you feel about the Pitino inserting himself piece of this? And I'll point out, St. John's is 18-3 and 9-1 in Big East play. Like, he's having a great year at St. John's right now. So he might not do that if they're having a bad year.
I don't understand him inserting himself into it. Like, we talked about this over text. I don't even understand like why he cares or would do this at the moment. Is it just to get attention on him and his team?
I think so. I think that's what it is. Because I was like, oh, who's St. John's playing on Saturday? What time do they play? Oh, they play at noon on Saturday. All right. They're having a great year.
Yeah.
Like I would bet there's more of that to this than a desire to not make John Calipari feel bad. Now, Rick Pitino has experienced this in real life. Now, I will point out that what Rick Pitino's experienced and what he mentioned, Ed Cooley, who's the Georgetown coach, what he experienced, those are two totally different things. So Rick Pitino left to go coach the Boston. He left Kentucky to go coach the Boston Celtics, which everyone understood, but obviously he left Kentucky during a very successful period for Kentucky. And then he came back to college basketball as the coach of Kentucky's hated in-state rival, Louisville. So yeah, it's the rivalry piece of it. Ed Cooley left Providence for conference rival Georgetown, like hated forever rival Georgetown. Now, Arkansas and Kentucky have been in the same league since 1992. But it's not the same thing. The other reason this is not the same thing is Kentucky fans wanted John Calipari gone. When he lost to Oakland this past NCAA tournament, they wanted him gone. They wanted him out of there. And so there was real thought to firing him, which would have cost Kentucky $34 million. So instead of firing him, he goes and takes the Arkansas job. I think he did him a favor.
Okay, so this is complex, and we have to bring this up in football context. This is a football show, but just so I'm up to speed on my college basketball history. Pitino won a national title for Kentucky. Yeah, 2. Yeah. Oh,
I'm sorry, one, and then
he won in '96,
right, and then Tubby won in '98. Yeah.
Okay. So this circumstance, as you pointed out, is much different because it's like, what would happen if like Jim Harbaugh went and coached Ohio State? Like, I think that like Jim Harbaugh is the number one, figure right now in Michigan football history, or at least top two with Schembechler.
Right.
No matter what, he goes back. That would be weird if you go to a rival, right? Like that's what happens.
If Jim Harbaugh came back to college football at Ohio State or Michigan State, that would be the equivalent to what Pitino did.
That's the equivalent of what happened here.
Yeah.
So when you get booed, I think you get booed because you're also coaching your team's rival. So like that's completely different.
Right. And Arkansas is not really Kentucky's rival.
Right. So if like Ryan Day went to coach Michigan next year, that would be like, what the hell? But if Ryan Day went to the pros, didn't work out in the pros, then came back to coach Wisconsin, like I don't know if that would hit the same. That said, my number one take in general. Let me ask you this because I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
How do LSU fans feel about Saban?
I think now they're more okay, but they were very mad, very, very mad, and booed when he came back with Alabama.
Could Nick Saban go to Tiger Stadium for a night game in 5 years wearing an LSU polo and celebrate their national title there as a Tiger?
I think he could. I think they would cheer him now. One, because time has passed. Two, out of respect for how good he was in general, period.
But could he be... Because, like, here's the other thing with Saban. It's a little bit messy. Like, what he did at Alabama wasn't just go win. Like, he created their number one rival dynasty. But my number one take, and some of them get kind of weird, is that if a coach wins you a national championship, regardless of the circumstances, that coach should be celebrated as a part of your history forever, no matter what. And it might take some time, like you said, if you go to coach a rival or whatever. But like Rick Pitino might have been booed when he returned to Rupp Arena at the time. But as time passes, I think that Rick Pitino should be able to go back to Kentucky.
He has come back and been cheered now. So
right. So that's what is interesting to me. It's like Cal might get booed this week. But I think as time passes and he's not coaching or he's somewhere else, you will forever be remembered as a champion, because I think that's what that does for you. And that's the whole thing with the Ryan Day discussion we just had. Mm-hmm. It's like he might lose to Michigan the next 5 years in a row. I still think that in 20 years, when he returns to Ohio Stadium, he can stand at midfield wearing a Buckeye pullover and get a cheer. I think that you earned that if you win at least one championship. I think in this case,
though, I'm trying to figure out the football equivalent to this. Well, actually, it's at Kentucky. If Mark Stoops has another bad year this year, Kentucky fans are going to be really mad at him. But if Mark Stoops has another bad year this year and then leaves to take the Iowa job because Kirk Ferentz retired after this season, I think Kentucky fans, if they thought about it, would be very pleased that happened, because it saved them from paying a buyout that as we discussed on the show the other day, they're not going to pay. So John Calipari, they were done with him. Like, they were done. And Kentucky's administration, Mitch Barnhart, the athletic director, had decided to bring him back. Like, this was going to be a terrible year in Lexington because the fan base was going to be sick of the coach. The coach was going to be sick of the fans. Like, it was going to be awful if he came back. Now, they like Mark Pope a lot, the new coach, who is a former player who won a national title with them as a player. They love him. They're happy with him at the moment. The record could be better, but the SEC is tough right now. They would be unhappy with Calipari. Calipari's at Arkansas now. He's not doing well. The same schematic deficiencies that caused the Kentucky fans to say maybe the game has passed this guy by, happening in Arkansas. So if I'm a Kentucky fan, and I'm not going to tell you what to do. If you want to boo somebody, you paid for your ticket. You boo lustily. But this particular guy did you a big favor by taking this other job. He saved you $34 million that you would have had to pay out between now and 2029. Like that is a big time savings.
John Calipari is a Kentucky national champion.
Correct.
Period.
Yeah. So I would say cheer, say thank you for John Wall, for Boogie Cousins, for Anthony Davis, for Marcus Teague, for Karl Anthony Towns. Thanks for that. Thanks for letting us see all that. Thanks for the national title. And oh, by the way, thanks for getting the hell out of here for free instead of making us pay you $34 million. Thanks for that.
So, but like whether they boo, like, because like here's the thing. Booing because they're in your stadium for a game is competition.
Yeah.
Like, getting booed when you go back to Kentucky on a random summer night for a event or something would be different.
I don't think they would do that. I think they would cheer him at that point.
I think that you are cheered as a main fixture in Kentucky basketball history, but I don't think being booed in the preamble to a competition is the same thing. So do what you want. I just feel like if I were a fan of a team and a coach brought me a national championship, no matter what they did outside of a felony or hurting somebody or whatever, that I would remember them as time passed as what they are, which is a national champion. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I think it's perfectly fair. And I think in this case, it's even better. He brought you a national title, and instead of
and not just a national title, Andy, maybe the greatest run of basketball talent in the history of the sport.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now that just makes them mad because they think about the times they didn't win a national title with all that talent.
Too, like in college basketball, winning the championship is so much more complicated than it is in football, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it's really hard to win in both sports.
I don't know. I covered that national title run for the Anthony Davis team and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist and that bunch. It was actually very similar to the college football national titles of that era, which is just have overwhelmingly more talent than everybody else and it'll all work out.
Yeah, but I just feel like in basketball, like I covered basketball for a few years, believe it or not, and I can't remember. It's been 12 years, but when Ohio State lost, and I believe it was to Kentucky in the Sweet 16 in 2011. God, it's been almost 15 years.
This is the team before the national title team for Kentucky.
Yeah, but that Ohio State team was 34-3. And had Jared Sullinger, Dallas Lauderdale, David Lighty, Will Buford, and John Diebler, Deshaun Thomas, and Aaron Kraft on its team. Like, it was like the best team in college basketball that year. And like, they shot really poorly in that game. I remember people were shocked when they lost because Kentucky was a 4 seed and they weren't, they had Josh Harrelson on that team who was really, really good.
Jorts.
And Brandon Knight. I remember this like it was yesterday. Kyle Rowland spilled coffee on my keyboard before the game started. But like also too, William Buford in that game went 2 for 16 and he was Ohio State's best player. And it's like Ohio State, the team with no weakness, had a great big man, had great 3-point shooters, had a great point guard. Like there was the best college basketball team maybe that Ohio State's ever had. And they just lost to a talented team in the Sweet 16 because their best
Greg
player
and Mike Conley Jr. team.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
To differ.
Too. Yeah. But I'm saying like from top to bottom, like it definitely could probably stand toe to toe. And like I feel like that team playing in the moment versus Ohio State's Conley, the team that you covered in the championship game, right? You covered that game, didn't you? The Florida Ohio State basketball one?
Yep, I did.
Like the point I'm making is that Ohio State was probably better than Kentucky that year. They had a poor shooting performance in a game where the other team had talented players and they just lost in the Sweet 16, which was really, really sad for them. It's just harder to like go all the way by shooting well.
Right.
Like, I don't know. Like in football, it's physical. If you've got great lines and great running
also,
back, like that translates.
If one or two great players have a transcendent game, you can beat a more talented team. Like that.
In basketball, So
in basketball,
like, it's matchups are more important. Like I know matchups matter in football, but like if you have a really good 2-guard in basketball and their defender who I don't know anything about basketball, but like, or if your big man is 7'1" and you're
and
playing
since they put a 3-point line on the court, If you have one guy who just goes off,
Yeah.
it changes everything. Yeah.
So, but like to me, it's like when I think about college basketball, I mean, I wonder what's the percentage of coaches in the college basketball Hall of Fame that even have a championship? It's not like football, right? Like, I mean, shit. How many did Coach K?
There's a lot more teams, a lot more coaches. How many
more teams,
Coach K won?
Coaches, a lot more.
Coach K won 5, I believe.
Yeah, like I think that like winning 5 college basketball titles is almost more impressive than like what Saban did from a competition standpoint. Is that sacrilegious to say?
No, I think Coach K and Nick Saban would be very happy to be mentioned in the same breath. I think both of them would be thrilled to be mentioned with one another. So I think you're right about that. And the 3-point example, I mean, the Kentucky Oakland game, the Jack Golke guy just torching Kentucky. Of course, Kentucky had more talent than Oakland, but with
some of the like, didn't somebody on St. Peter's a few years ago? Who did they beat?
Kentucky, which is why the fans wanted Calipari gone.
Yeah, I'm going to look at the box score of that game right now. They won 85-79, and I'm just going to go.
St. Peter's didn't have anybody just go crazy from 3. They just flat out beat them. Like they just beat them.
I mean, St. Peter's also shot 55% from 3 in the game, and Kentucky shot 24%. So, like,
55%.
And sometimes shooting. I mean, shooting really well. Also, they had they shot 50% from the floor in the game. So, like, you can say that they didn't play good enough defense to alter shot. Like, I know that it's more complicated than just shooting percentage, but if you play a team that's shooting the ball lights out, it's hard to win.
Yep. Sometimes your shots fall. Exactly. It is much more variable in football. So, but the fact is that it's stacked up, and Calipari hadn't gotten them out of the second weekend of the tournament since 2019, and it was 4 tournaments. Like that's the equivalent of not getting Alabama into a game better than the Citrus Bowl.
I'm looking at the Kentucky starting lineup in that game. Ty Washington, Keon Brooks, Oscar, I don't know how to say that name, Tshiebwe or something.
Oscar Tshiebwe.
Severe Wheeler, and Kellen Grady. Are any of them in the NBA?
There's one of those in the NBA right now. So
like also too, they lost to St. Peter's, but that also like wasn't what made Kentucky great.
And that was when Calipari was kind of having to change his philosophy a little bit, because the one and done thing was becoming less effective, because teams were like Tshiebwe was a good example of an older guy, because they got him from West Virginia, and he wound up playing a couple of years at Kentucky and was, college player of the year candidate going into his last year. Like that was Calipari trying to change things.
There's no Karl Anthony Towns or
no. There's no Anthony
John
Davis
Wall walking. Anthony Davis walking through the door. So like I think too, like I wonder too, like Coach Cal's success at Kentucky translates more to like what Nick Saban was doing, in the sense of we just got all the best players, and like anybody could coach these guys to this.
Well, and that is another problem. That was another big criticism of Cal, is it did seem like his philosophy was anybody could do, like the schematically anybody could probably do that, and he was not great at figuring out who his best 5 were or who the best combo of players were, substitution patterns, that sort of stuff. So,
which blows my mind, by the way.
Yeah, but those were their biggest complaints at the end, and those complaints still coming home to roost at Arkansas right now. All right, one more question. This is the one Vance asked us at the end of the show yesterday. How soon will Bill Belichick start complaining about the leniency of linemen downfield on pass plays? Which made me laugh, because it is very specific, and I can just imagine, because in the NFL, linemen are only allowed to be 1 yard past the line of scrimmage before the ball is thrown. In college football, it's 3, but let's be perfectly honest, a lot of times they're like 5 or 6 yards downfield, nobody calls it.
I mean, I do think that they should be precise with the rule. Like they should.
I think there's so much money, like they can have somebody standing 3 yards past the line of scrimmage, looking down the field, and if they see number 65 cross it, drop a flag.
When you and I were in Mobile this week, I don't know if people know this about how we got there, but I drove from Dallas, because flights from Dallas to Mobile were scarce, and I didn't want to have a layover in Buffalo. And I used Buffalo but I was driving by myself through the night, because I didn't even leave Dallas till Sunday at like 4. and I was watching the Bills game in the car, and I bet 4 figures on the Bills money line. Okay, like I went and it wasn't low 4 figures. Well, the first digit was low. I'm not rich, but it blows my mind in 2024 how we are eye testing the Josh Allen spot on 4th and inches. Like, and like I know I'm like taking this.
You want the chip in the ball? Bit. Yeah, I got you.
I don't like. Is there a way that we can have a laser in the sticks that goes laser beam in the stick? But like, do we have the technology to put a microchip in the ball and a laser at the end of the sticks so that the 10 yards is like? Are we put people on the moon? You know what I mean? I think
yes.
Like, I don't know. Do we? I don't know. We like. There's got to be a salute because like he got the first down. And I'm not just saying it because I like was crying in the car, but like he got the first down. So, and it's like they lost.
I knew something was amiss, and people were going to complain about this likely forever. At the end of that play, as I'm watching the head linesman and the line judge run toward the center of the field, and one is well across the first down marker, and the other one is well behind it. And I'm like, oh, they're going to meet in the middle here, and it's going to make someone very unhappy.
But like the thing that is crazy is that like they got the first down on 3rd and they marked it short. And
right.
Like, how could you possibly on the field call whether he got it? Like there was no.
You can't. Now, here's the thing. They ran their version of the tush push, which is a very bad version of the tush push because nobody actually pushes Josh Allen. He goes over the same spot every time. Like Chris Jones knew exactly what they were doing every time because he was jacking up the right guard, pushing him into the center, knocking them that way so that Josh Allen would get stuck. And
by the way, guy's a stud, Chris Jones.
But a lot of this is on Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for the Bills. When that play didn't work twice in a row, maybe don't run it again. Maybe just hand the ball to James Cook, who in the second half is averaging like 7 yards a carry.
Well, why
maybe you do that.
The Philly one. I feel like the Philly one never gets stopped.
But the Philly one is the Philly one got stopped more because Jason Kelsey's gone. But the Philly one, Jalen Hurts has a lot to do with it. As good of an athlete as Josh Allen is, I don't think he squats 750 pounds like Jalen Hurts does.
I don't know.
And the other thing is, Philly runs it correctly in that they actually shove Jalen Hurts. Like, there's nobody behind Josh Allen shoving him.
Yeah, so anyway.
Yeah.
I just think it's strange that we can't come up with a way where there's like a GPS or something that like.
Okay, so Bill Belichick will be stumping for this probably because I bet he does. I agree with Vance that he's going to get incredibly frustrated about this. He's going, what are we doing here? Like, it is going to be, why isn't there a person standing 3 yards from the line of scrimmage looking for 50, 60, and 70 numbers crossing it? I'm with you on that, Vance. I am
what
more.
Rule do you think is going to drive him the most insane? Like that's a very specific rule, but
that one will. That one will because it is called very tightly in the NFL, and because you teach your defense based on the fact that those guys can't do that. So
once
you teach your safeties.
Point,
right? You teach your safeties. If you see a 60 number downfield, trigger and go tackle the ball carrier because he's not throwing it.
Not throwing it, right.
Which is what drove everybody crazy about that Gus Malzahn pop pass. Because they would run it.
Yeah, go ahead.
They would run that, and there would be linemen like 5 yards downfield, but they'd only call it half the time. It's worth it because you may score a touchdown.
I wonder what off the field rule will drive him most crazy.
Ooh, that's a good question too. Because there's a lot of stupid things. Like cream cheese isn't banned anymore, so I don't think it'll be that one.
I can't just pick up the phone and call a guy when I want. Like I got
right. I know.
I can't pick up the phone.
Spring evaluation period. This is the Nick Saban rule. This drove Nick Saban crazy. So basically, Senator Tommy Tuberville and some other coaches got really mad because Nick Saban would outwork them in the spring. And so they banned head coaches from being on the road in the spring. So when Bill Belichick has to sit at his desk And his assistants are like, well, I saw this great safety in Florida. And another assistant's like, well, I saw this great safety in Ohio. Bill's like, wow, I'd love to be able to get on a plane and see that guy with my own eyes, but I can't. That's going to drive him nuts.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see like what his involvement in the actual discourse of the sport are.
Well, I'm also curious about Bill Belichick in general. Like, one thing that has surprised me is he's not gotten the pop that Deion Sanders got when he went to Colorado. And I thought, this is Bill freaking Belichick coaching in college football, any major brand. Like, North Carolina is a big brand. I thought we would be a lot more interested in this. But I see the numbers on the columns and the videos and like, people are not nearly as interested in Bill Belichick as they were in Deion.
Yeah, well, I think that like if we theorize as to why, it's probably just because he's not a person. Like Deion is a mega personality, and like the thing about
and
Deion,
he was also people's favorite player. Like, being somebody's favorite player, I think, gives you a lot more of a connection than being someone's favorite coach.
Here's the other thing about Deion too. Deion didn't just take the job. Deion said a lot of shit like all the time. Like he would make headlines not just because he was Deion Sanders, but he would say things that would threaten or at least I don't threaten's the right word, but would threaten to change the paradigm of the sport. Like that. Yeah. Like he was very outspoken about a lot of different things. He did the media tours. He's, you know how Deion is. He's like the most charismatic dude in coaching. Like, so I think that it's like his star matter. Also,
like, he's one of the most charismatic human beings on the planet,
on Earth. But like, he's not just famous. He also did things to feed into that by acting a certain way. Yeah, which is a big deal. So,
but Bill Belichick, the other part that I find interesting about him is I was talking to somebody who has covered the one thing I like about the Senior Bowl is I get a chance to trade notes with the people who cover the NFL. And it was really interesting to hear people who've dealt a lot with the Belichick group over the years. And because he's bringing a lot of his guys, and obviously, you know, Josh McDaniels and those people who coached with him for a long time. Like, I think they probably helped him make this decision and probably, you know, we're studying along with him. I feel like this was a big offseason project. Like, he was doing a podcast with Matt Patricia and Michael Lombardi. Michael Lombardi is his GM at North Carolina. Like, I feel like they did a big project where they studied college football before he really committed to being into it. And one person told me that they think that the coaching is so bad in college football that they will just be able to coach these guys up and teach them better. And they'll have a personnel department that'll handle the recruiting, like, because you don't really need a bag man anymore. You just need, you know, to pay. But if that is true, and I don't know if that's true, that's one person telling that.
They're dead.
I think they're dead too. In that, if that's true, you cannot be that arrogant. You can't. There are great teachers of the sport in college football who also happen to be good recruiters. Like, I go back to when Brian Harsin goes to Auburn and he's like, we're going to develop these guys. I'm like, bro, Kirby Smart and Nick Saban are as good or better developers than you, and they're starting with better players. Like, you cannot think.
Well, here's the thing.
That way.
How much of a coaching advantage do you have to have if the other team has a 5-star corner and you have a 3-star receiver? Like, how much of a coaching advantage do you have to neutralize that?
More of a coaching advantage than can possibly exist.
Because it's not like they have bad coaches. That kid would have to come out raw, and you'd have to, without any coaching, and then Andy, JD goes live in 5 minutes. I would love to talk to you for another hour and a half. I just wanted to let you know.
It's Friday. He doesn't have a show on Friday.
Oh, okay. So we can go till 10:30, 4 o'clock. Yes. How about
11? We haven't talked once about what we need out of the garbage yet. So, I mean, I feel like the show's incomplete.
This flowed. But no, I thought this was a great show. I enjoyed it.
I did too. See, the arguing part is good. And let's talk, because I was kind of joking about it toward the end of that Michigan segment. Ari and I don't argue about stuff unless we actually feel that way. Like, it is not like one of the TV shows where before the show you meet up and you're like, you take this side, you take this side. I don't find that to be very interesting as a host, and I sure as hell don't find it interesting as when I'm the viewer or I'm the listener. So I hope you understand, like when we are going back and forth on that Michigan thing, we actually feel that way. And that's why you get a fairly authentic experience there.
Yeah, we don't plan to argue. So when we do argue, it might go a little bit longer because we're not really used to it. We don't do it that often.
Well,
and also
we started to argue on the phone and we're both like, wait. We can do this on the show.
I wanted to let you know, though, that like when we do argue, I want to reach through the screen and strangle you because I can't imagine how you feel the way that you do.
I know, and that's the best part. Now, the good thing is we're not one of those TV shows, and one of us is not Skip Bayless, and one of us is not Shannon Sharp, because I always felt like that could end in a murder. Because Shannon Sharp is a monster. Like he's an NFL Hall of Famer.
They manufacture disagreement, and like they are super freaking rich. So I don't know. Maybe we should start, but we're just. Gonna,
I know.
We're going to
listen. We're leaving a lot of money on the table, not manufacturing stuff.
We're trying our best to be as authentic as possible, and I think that the whole point of the show is, and I actually think that like as boring or not boring as intense as that topic was, like, I mean, if you've been paying attention to the chat, people have been arguing about that topic in the chat for the last half hour of the show, and we haven't even talked about it for 30 minutes.
And the reason I wanted to do it on the show, Ari, is people argue about that in the chat every day,
even
regardless of what we're actually talking about.
Yeah. And I'm going to write about this. So I've got to go pick up my car that had a loose nut somewhere. And I'm going to take my computer to the dealership as they finish the service. I'm going to write about this.
Nut, Ari?
They had a loose Buckeye nut in there somewhere. I drove my personal car to Mobile from Dallas, and it was an 8-hour drive. So it was a pretty long drive. And I told Andy, like, this Jeep, I have a Jeep Grand Cherokee, and I was afraid to buy it, guys, because I've only ever driven like foreign cars my whole life. And when I say foreign, I mean like Japanese. Don't get it.
You're talking about the Toyotas and the Hondas that run forever. I got you.
Yeah, my first car was this, and that was an American-made car, and I think that one was actually pretty good. But my understanding is when you buy an American-made car, that like you just need to accept that it's going to start falling apart at 60,000 miles. And like my car had 59,000 miles on it when I drove it there, and I said to Andy on the way to dinner when I drove him in the Jeep to dinner, this car has been really great.
Wait, why were you driving me?
We were driving. Yeah.
I drove my own truck to Mobile. While I was driving, the temperature gauge went from a bar to numbers, which means you're overheating. And so I had to take my truck to the dealership.
Andy's American-made truck was in the shop. And I was like, this car, say what you want about it. I mean, this car has been great to me. And then the second I get to Shreveport on the way home, by the way, stayed at Bally's, gambled a little bit, then went to sleep. Yeah, those hotel rooms are kind of musky, but like I kind of like the vibe of it. And then I started hearing the clicking. And I was like, oh, boy,
sucks.
Here we go. So I took it to the Jeep dealership yesterday, and they told me that it was a minor, some engine block screw or something was coming loose, and they just tightened it, and the stuff would go away, and it's $100 to fix it or something. I was like, oh, thank God. But I was collecting my extended warranty paperwork. I was like, oh, I'm not paying for this. And my hope is that the car could, because it's been paid off for a few years. I'm hoping that it can last me for a few more as my daughter throws crackers and goldfish all over the back seat. And then when she grows up enough to not make a what was the age of your kids when they stopped trashing your car? Or do they still
waiting? They're 15 and 13, and I'm still waiting. The 15-year-old's going to have his own vehicle soon, and he better not be trashing that one. I do wonder if he'll respect others' vehicles more when he has one of his own. I'm hoping that's the case.
2021 Jeep Grand Cherokee is a good car for him, but I think you're going 4Runner. That's the foreign.
No, we've changed. We think he's. I think he may be getting an F-150.
That's electric.
Because they last forever.
Yeah.
You might have to say I had to visit the shop with mine, but it was a very simple fix, and I'm good to go now.
I started thinking. I started thinking like, okay, well, if this is the beginning of the end for me, because like the Grand Cherokee, not a I don't even want to say it. It's in the shop.
No, you're just jinxing it. Don't do it.
but I have an extended warranty that's 5 years to 100,000 miles. So for me, it's like I have 40,000 miles still to work with. But then I was like thinking, well, maybe I should trade this thing in just to get out ahead of it. The car's been paid off for a year and a half. Like
Ferris, the Michigan fan, F-150s are made in Dearborn, Michigan. Good choice. Oh, I know. There is a sticker on my windshield. This truck was born in Dearborn.
Yeah, like Fords are actually, I don't want to offend people, but like some of the lower end Fords aren't made well, but the trucks are made better. Is that the way? Like
now, listen, when one of those companies decides to advertise with us, we will say that truck is the greatest truck in the history of the world, and they're all and those are awesome, and the others suck. But I will tell you right now, because the competition is so fierce among American pickup truck makers, so whether it's Ram, whether it's Ford, whether it's Chevy / GMC, they're all really good. They're all really awesome.
Yeah. Andy has an F-150 Raptor. I think it's really, really cool. And it like feels like you're powerful when you're driving it. But I actually started having the thought of like, well, what would my next car be? And I started like looking at CarMax and just kind of trying to get then I was listening to a podcast about how EVs depreciate very fast. And I was like, oh shit, maybe I can get like a really cool, I thought like an EV would be fun. And then the guy called and said my Jeep was fine. So we'll table that discussion.
We move on.
We'll table that discussion
before we go. One more thing before we go. Ryan, Andy, that story Ari said yesterday was wild. He was a terrible human being. It sounds like he's improved. This is the pizza story.
Yeah.
This is the Ari's drunk, takes the about to be first bite taken piece of pizza out of somebody's mouth, takes a bite of it and throws it in the trash. Ari, I am glad you've evolved as a human being. I'm very glad.
Yeah, it was just a scumbag move. There's no question about it. And I actually feel like here's the thing about human psychology. Do you think that everybody so we're at the end, we're in grab ass time. So can we just take 5 more
minutes?
Throw the
story time lower third up river.
Thought about this. So there are good human beings and there are shit human beings, right? Like there are just bad people out there.
Sure.
Do you think,
and I think the good do you agree with me that the good ones far outweigh the bad?
I think so. I like to think that.
Yeah. Okay.
Like the thing too is that like it's hard for me to do you think that somebody who cheats on their spouse is a bad person? Like where do you draw the line of bad person?
Usually, maybe there's some circumstances, but usually, yes. So with everything, like, I want to know the whole story here.
Right. So like it depends on how far your bar is down on what describes somebody as good or bad. Like I think that like the number of evil people is probably very minuscule. But good and bad's a little bit more subjective. But I just want to know though too, do you think that bad people from a psychological standpoint view themselves as good people?
Those are sociopaths, dude.
Because like I think I'm a good person.
I think you probably are a good person now. I think the Ari that stole that piece of pizza was a bad person though.
I was really, really depressed at that time. Like I was like my first long-term girlfriend broken up with. It was and I was like inebriated. It was just a bad me. That's not who I am. I think that
also people do make mistakes. I think that's one thing that we've talked about this on the show before. And I've talked about like telling my kids, like when you mess up, just say I messed up. I'm sorry. And a lot of times that goes a long, long way.
But my main premise though is that like if you ask everybody if they're a good or a bad person, like everybody says I'm a good person. So what do who cares what I think about myself? I'm a good father, I think.
This is the Michigan-Ohio State conversation all over again. This is the Michigan conversation.
Yeah.
Who cares what everybody else thinks? Who cares what I think?
No, I know, but I think that the other people are the judge. You shouldn't judge yourself on whether you're a good or a bad person.
Your opinion doesn't matter.
Judge.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Your opinion doesn't matter
it brings you right back to the Michigan discussion because it's like, who cares what Michigan fans' opinions are? The opinions of that are everyone else that looks at you. Like that's like I could think I'm skinny, but does it matter what I think? Like it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the clothes say and what the people say.
Ferris says if you buy everybody a slice of pizza, we're all good.
I will. I'm going to go buy a pizza and hand it out to, some people that need it, maybe. That's the thing.
I mean, don't hand it out to drunk college kids because that's who you stole it from.
That's right. But I do if I'm at a gas station and there's a panhandler out by the gas station and they ask me for money, like I ask them, like, can I get you a food or a drink? A lot like that. Like I do that,
which is probably the right question.
And then I buy them food and drink. So I hope that I've repaid the guy I stole. Oh, I hope he's not homeless, but I hope that like my good deeds outweigh the bad. But yeah, introspective Ari Andy at the end of here.
Love it. Hey, that's what Friday's all about. Ari, I love you.
I love you too.
You've improved as a human. Wrong about the Michigan thing, but that's okay. And we love you too. And we will talk to you again on Monday.